Very good evening. Welcome to Pitch Camp. This is our 12th webinar, and this is our second webinar on the Growth Marketing and Sales Leadership series. I'm very excited to have Shruti Kapoor today, who is the CEO of Wingman. And we have got fantastic responses today for this particular event. And I would love to have this event to be a very strong, engaging event with a lot of Q&A back and forth. She has put together some amazing insights, which is very tough to get in today's world. So I'm very grateful to her to have agreed to come on PitchCamp platform and also share some of these insights. Right. So before we jump in and start picking up her brains, we'll run a quick poll. We are using Slido, so I would request all of you to take this poll right now. Let me just share my screen.
Yeah, it'll be fantastic to get to know the audience and what they care about. Looking forward to learning more about all of you through the poll as well.
So this is our first poll. Request while we wait for others to join in, help us understand what profile, what role best describes you. It will help us to moderate and bring up some relevant questions so that you maximize your time in this webinar today. Fantastic. So I think we are tilted towards majority of them being entrepreneurs so far. We've got 10 responses of the 20 people in attendance today. So there you go, Shruti. Your entrepreneurs. So we've got majority of them in the entrepreneurs section.
Fellow tribe members.
Thank you so much, everyone. We'll take a pause on this particular poll. We're going to keep this interactive. We've got two more polls coming in based on Shruti's request. So Shruti, thank you so much once again. Welcome to Pitch Camp. Let's kick this off. Give us a little brief of your background. When we got started talking about this, you shared a lot about how you have had experience in the previous pandemic as well. Not many people in my network have such a unique experience. So talk us through a little bit of that and your journey of starting Wingman before we jump in.
I think if you'd asked me, maybe 15 years back, and maybe I'm dating myself a little bit by saying this, right? What I wanted to become or what I was preparing to become, I would have said that I was, fully into biotechnology and training to become either an epidemiologist or a neuroscientist. In fact, I spent a year doing research on dengue. And at that point, I was studying in Singapore, and that is when the SARS epidemic hit. So I remember we were I was in university, we were giving our exams, and because of the epidemic, everything changed. They had to change the venue for the exams. Everybody had to get a temperature scan before they could go into the exam hall. And it was pretty scary, but of course, nothing to this level. It was also an integrated university, so I could see people in hazmat suits dealing with suspected SARS patients. So that was that. And then, if you'd asked me maybe 12 years back or so what I wanted to be, or 10 years back, I would have told you that I was doing my MBA and then I decided to go into investment banking. And then I can tell you about the other type of crisis that happened around then, which was, of course, the 2008 financial crisis, right. When I was an investment banker again in Singapore. Some ups and downs that I'm familiar with. And of course, COVID has left us all feeling a little bit disoriented. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with other entrepreneurs and, leaders. To see how they are orienting themselves, what type of questions they are asking to orient themselves. Coming back to my journey to Wingman, right? So I spent a decade in finance, and then somehow found myself at a fintech startup which was just launching in India. And at that point, what quickly became my role was figuring out the go-to-market. And, go-to-market is a fancy word for saying, okay, figure out how to find people you can sell to. Right, and what can you sell to them? So through that process, I realized, coming from a world of finance, people in sales like to talk a lot about, the data in the CRM, and they use that as the North Star for making every decision. But when we actually started looking at that data, the data is, pretty crappy. And that's what motivated me to think about, how can you make that data better? Right. So just to give you an example, like if in any sales cycle, 80% of the leads don't go anywhere, right? Your conversion rate would be somewhere between 20 to 30% at best. But what also happens is that those 70 to 80% leads also get lost in terms of the learnings and the insights. Right. So imagine it's like if you were reading a book and you were throwing out 80% of the words and then trying to make sense of what you're seeing. And my challenge was that there was nothing that anyone can do or I could do to get my salespeople to, give me more insights about those 80% of the people, because they have no incentive to write essays about, why this person banged the phone on me.
Right.
And so that kind of became my quest to say, how can we get better data and insights, not just for the sales team, but also for the business as a whole, to understand and make better informed decisions, right? Because it's easy to get swayed by a salesperson coming and saying, you know what, everybody that I've spoken to has complained about pricing. Okay. Right? Or everybody that I speak to compares us with this competitor. But what's really valuable is to say, okay, is this happening in 20% of the calls, or is it really happening in 60% of the calls? So, I think that's exactly what Wingman does. We take in data from all types of sales calls, we analyze it, and with the perspective of being able to give insights both to the business and to the sales teams. But in addition to that, and that's why the name Wingman, we are actually a wingman for salespeople during these conversations. So we also give them insights and feedback as they are on a sales call.
So these insights happen real time to the sales team members?
So we also give them some insights real time.
So I think we've got a fair bit of audience coming in. That's great to see. So talk to us a little bit about your first few challenges. There are a few companies in this space who offer sales insights. In the US especially, the two most popular ones are Chorus.ai and Gong.io. So talk to us a little bit about your target market and what is your journey in acquiring the first 10 customers.
Sure. I would also, of course, love to hear the audience top challenges when it comes to sales.
Sure.
So maybe at some point we could do another poll on that, Vimlesh.
Sure.
So I think for us, the segment that we sell to is the segment that has inside sales, right? And the reason for that is because inside sales is a lot more gearing towards coming up with a machine that works than about, shooting rockets and seeing which one goes the farthest, right? Which is how a lot of people have historically looked at sales. We kind of want to support teams that are much more around, creating a machine, driving a process, figuring out how to make that machine better and better wise. Of course, when it comes to that, right, one of the big segments is software and SaaS companies. But there are also other segments, right? So, for example, even in education, even in finance, a lot of sales actually happens through the inside sales channel. And for us, we've always focused on the English-speaking markets, right? It's of course a language-based product, right? So our focus has been the US. We also work with a lot of companies from India that are selling into the US.
Right.
I think in terms of challenges or what have we seen the market evolve, right? So it's a relatively new space, I would say. While Chorus and Gong, have had a little bit of a head start. It's not it's not like somebody trying to enter into the CRM market.
Right.
Right. So I think the market is still evolving. I think there are lots of different pieces of the puzzle on what people need and what people want. Right. So I think people have taken different approaches to it. Of course, for all sales tech tools, I think there is a little bit of a philosophy that is influenced by Salesforce, which is to say I will help the sales managers and sales leaders. And it's okay if I am a pain in the ass for everybody else, right? Which is kind of what Salesforce has always been. And I think that a lot of the enterprise tools still go that way. But the challenge with that approach is adoption is really the new metric for success. Right. And so if you take the approach of not being very friendly for the sales reps, not supporting them, but just adding an overhead for them, I think in the long run, the adoption suffers. Right.
Right.
And so our approach has always been, to be a wingman, not just for the sales managers, but for the entire sales team.
Folks, I'm putting up another poll. This is to help understand your number one sales challenge that you are facing today while selling to US. Very relevant to the topic that we are talking about today. So if you can take this poll, and it will also help us, to understand your number one challenge that you're facing today while selling to the US. Especially, it's also tougher, right? When you don't have a local presence and when you're sitting all remotely. Your teams are all remote. You as an entrepreneur are remote. Your primary sources of information is only the news channels and what you get to read over the internet. So finding the right prospects, okay, that seems to be unanimous. So we are evenly split between engaging the prospects, getting the meetings, and deal closures.
As I'm looking at the data and I'm thinking about what has changed with COVID.
Right. Fantastic.
I think maybe all of these things have become harder. And we'll talk a little bit more about which ones have maybe become even more hard than the others.
Right. Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating on this one. So, Shruti, over to you. We'll look forward to hear from you.
I will share my screen just because, usually I would want to just talk, but I think it's probably useful to also see some of the data that, is coming in.
Yeah, just as a disclaimer to everyone, this is the first time, such insights are being made available. So, very glad to have Shruti to share this. Yeah, Shruti, go ahead.
I think a lot of conversation in the last 3-4 months has, of course, been about, how things have changed, right? And I think this is what I felt for a large part of March and April, right? Suddenly, you kind of hit by a wave and completely disoriented. But then I think as time has gone by, the bigger question has been, when will we start seeing fairer weather, right? When will we get out of these choppy waters? And I think now what we are realizing is that it's not about getting out of the choppy waters because, pretty much nobody has an idea when things would go back to normal. Right. And the question is, how do we ride on this new normal? And sorry for a lot of these surfing-based analogies. I was trying to learn to surf before, of course, COVID happened, and now I'm stuck in Bangalore. But I think it's important for all of us now to deal with this situation and to say that we do need to ride this out. But what can we do to make our ride better, right? How do we predict the waves? How do we read the signs and continue to be on our feet? And I think literally the question that we've all been asking has been, how bad this is and really what should I be doing to change this for the better, right? At least for my own business. And I think the only way to kind of begin to answer some of those questions is to take a deeper, little more analytical look at what customers have been saying to us, right? Because it's easy to come up with a confirmation bias where I feel that, okay, everybody has been talking about layoffs. And so I need to just lay low and wait for this period to get over, right? So like, for example, of course, we sell into the sales industry. And if you were looking at, your social media posts in April or May, pretty much everything was about, team ABC laid off X number of people. This other company laid off Y number of people. And that was kind of what was happening so much around different sales teams. But then I wanted to go back and see whether that was broadly true, right? And other questions like that. So it's not so much about how has the world changed, but also about how much has the world changed. So maybe actually, Bimlesh, if after this we could do a quick poll for this group as well to see how they have thought about their own quota and their own targets for the year once COVID started, right?
Okay.
So this is this is a survey that someone did recently in the US with some startups and also some larger companies, which said that if at the start of the year I had asked a company, listen, what will 60% or more of your reps meet quota, right? 64% of the companies would have said yes.
Okay.
Right. Today, that number is only 22%. So only 22% companies today believe that even 60% of their reps will meet quota. I am curious to hear from the people in this room, how have you changed, your own targets and quotas for your team because of what you have been seeing around for COVID?
So folks, this is the last poll, I promise. No more polls after this. And all these polls are anonymous.
We should have reserved one poll for the end to ask everyone how much they loved this.
Yeah, we'll ask that through the chat.
Somebody's quota has been increased during this.
So I got majority of them retaining the quota and 30% decreasing the quota. Thanks everyone. We hit the 10 number mark.
So what is interesting here, Bimlesh, is that the numbers that we saw in the poll in the US were actually very, very similar. Right. So while people's expectations for their reps to meet quota have changed so much, only 30% of the companies in the US in this survey actually decreased the quota, right? Now the question is that because companies are being unfair to their sales reps? So, one is, what does this mean for the company? What does this mean for the sales reps? And what does this mean for actually running a sales team where, the morale must be much lower because the expectation to meet your quota is so much lower, right? And of course, salespeople, are pretty much 50% on commission.
Right.
Right. And I think that one of the reasons why, fewer companies have decreased quota while the world has changed so much is not so much to just be unfair to their sales teams, but because people are also having a hard time grasping how much they need to change things by, right? And how much has the world changed and when will it regain normality, right? So it's just been a bit of a lag. And I think some of that lag has been because of lack of information. So, what we want to do during this conversation today is to see, what is the understanding, what is the gap between our understanding of the market sentiment, which is what, a lot of it comes from our own gut feeling and conversations, versus what is actually happening in those seller-buyer interactions. And of course, from my perspective, I strongly believe that the only way to understand these things with somewhat lesser bias is by looking at actual conversations between customers and sellers, right? So that we can see the patterns and we can, adjust our flight paths. So this is, an overview of the data. What I'm presenting the insights from, it's, 1.5 million minutes of sales calls from 2020. And what we wanted to do was to see, January when things were normal to now, have we started seeing some trends? I had some expectations, right? When I had started looking at this data around April and May, March was of course horrible for everyone. And then May looked like there was some signs of recovery. So when I started looking at this data now, and this data is literally 1 day old, our expectation was that we will see more trends towards recovery. But I think what we've seen has surprised us somewhat. Right. So I've removed the exact numbers on purpose, but this is the trends on the number of phone calls, and these are all sales related numbers, right? And number of video meetings and calls, right? So if you see, from Feb to March, this number collapsed, right? But while there was a little bit of an uptick in May, this number has again come down in June and July. What this, I think, indicates is partially that, there is actually not not that much of good phone number data available for personal or mobile numbers, right? And so there is going to be definitely some segments that are almost not reachable, and there are going to be certain parts of the industry that are going to struggle with even making some of these cold calls, etc. Right? Surprisingly, on the other hand, the number of video meetings has continued to go up. And, honestly, this is my hypothesis at this stage, but my hypothesis is that, people have to have many more conversations, even with the same set of customers, to be able to close deals. While I'm not able to maybe prospect as much, I'm probably doing, if I was doing 5 follow-ups earlier, maybe that number has gone to 8. But I'll also be eager to hear from others if they have a different take on this. But this is what we've seen in terms of the data. And of course, end of the quarter, you always expect a little bit of a bump. But this trend has actually continued into July as well. And what is interesting is that it's actually higher than what it was in January.
So these video calls, you mean to interpret them as the Zoom calls? So Wingman also integrates with Zoom?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Zoom, Google Meet, those type of things. The other thing to watch out for, and especially for founders and leaders, is that with people working from home, right, and maybe things settling down, are people reaching a burnout point as well, right? Like, are you pushing harder and harder on the input metrics because the output metrics are harder to come by, all right? And that's something to be careful. And then, of course, what I wanted to see was how often are people really talking about things like layoffs. I need to check with my CFO. My budgets are frozen. I don't have budget. So we did an analysis of those calls to say how often is that coming up. Of course, we've seen a big jump from the January and February baseline. And as you can imagine, in June, end of the quarter, right, as people tried to push harder, these trends have also become more pronounced. So if you think about this is happening maybe, in 0.3% of calls or so, this number is tripled, right, when it comes to customers talking about these things. Now, as a founder, when I think about this, I'm like, okay, so what do I do if people are going to talk about this? Right. So one takeaway is that actually maybe people are not talking about it as often as I initially had the gut feeling that everybody is talking about layoffs. But the second thing is, if people are bringing it up, then what is my response to them in a sales setting? Right. There are kind of two things that I can do. Right. If somebody comes and says I have a frozen budget, is to try to offer them better payment options or discounts. Right. Or I can try to say, listen, how can this help you in this current scenario, or how can, or in some sense, showing them ROI. So we also looked at that. Of course, discounts, as you can imagine, is not new just to COVID, right? People always love to talk about discounts, and both reps and customers bring it up. Right. So, by the way, the pink part here represents when a rep or a sales rep is bringing up a topic in a conversation, and the blue bar represents when a customer is initiating that topic in a conversation. What we are seeing is that discounts are talked about much more often than budgets. In some sense, even when are not chosen, people of course always wanted discounts, and it's not just that your reps are offering more and more discounts, right? Customers are also in some sense taking advantage of the situation and also dealing with their budget constraints. To say that, can you offer me a discount, or can you offer me flexible payments, or can you offer me something for free? And, it's a bit, I think it's something to be careful about, which is to allow people to ask that second level question when somebody asks for a discount, right? Is this something just as a carrot to close a deal, or is this a genuine concern that they have? How much of a discount is going to work? How long a period do they need the discount for? Or is there something else that's going to work to help them tide that over? So my takeaway would be to make sure that, the team has thought about this and there is a script to respond when, discount comes up in a conversation.
Right.
Because it is going to come up pretty often.
Can you just go back to that slide, Shruti? One interesting point there. Pre-COVID, you actually had 4x more calls talk about discounts and than budgets, and now it's only 2x of the calls that are in discounts. Is that the right interpretation? So that means conversations on discounts have decreased.
No, so as you can see, the percentage of conversations that are talking about discounts has increased, but as as a ratio of the conversations that were talking about budgets, that number hasn't increased as much. Right? So for every one conversation that talks about budget, 2 conversations talk about discount. And I think that apart from talking about discount, the solution is to always get on the floor talking about ROI. Right? Of course, with IPL going to start soon, hopefully, we will have some more cricketing jargon. So this is, these are the numbers for how often people are talking about ROI, right? And it's interesting, right? Like you would expect that ROI should always be important to people, right? Not just right now, but this is what we are seeing here, right? Before COVID happened, people were not talking about ROI as much, right? Now that number has more than doubled, and it's kind of seen a gradual increasing trend. Of course, June always, being end of the quarter, will have a bigger jump in these type of things, right? Because these are things that people will talk about when they are in a meeting with the CFO, and that is maybe closer to a decision process. But what we are seeing is that in July, this trend hasn't reduced. And instead, what we are seeing is that reps are more proactively bringing up ROI, right? So this ping bar here is significantly, longer than what we saw in the past month. So it's kind of the reps have caught on to this and said, okay, what, I think I need to talk about ROI to close these deals. Now, in the past, people have questioned and debated what is a good way to show ROI, are all those numbers fabricated, do people even believe in ROI calculators? But I think the takeaway is that there is no escape, right? How you choose to talk about it is, up to you and what makes sense for your business. But it is important to start talking about ROI. And I think the sooner you talk about ROI, the lesser your chance of going down the discount conversation or having to give a steep discount just because people are not clear on what value they're getting.
It'll be good to see if these ROI conversations are resulting in deal closures.
And the other question, that I had was, are people worried more about budgets, or are people, just dealing with too much, right? Because, suddenly work from home, maybe layoffs, maybe restructuring, maybe remote onboarding and all of those things, right? So is timing a bigger concern, or is the budget a bigger concern when people are, pushing back on closing a deal? A gut feel would have said that maybe budget is a big concern because that's what's kind of, more black and white. It's gotten frozen. It might not be something that the person who you're talking to controls directly, right? And there are more stakeholders and decision makers in the process today. But what the data tells us is that basically timing is coming up much more often than even budget. If in case the numbers people don't remember, right? This was around between 1 to 1.5% of the time, right? What we are seeing is this is 2 to 2.5% of calls happen, right? And of course, while these numbers in percentages look small, part of the reason that they look small is that this includes all conversations, including, their shortest cold call, which might only last 5 seconds. These numbers, of course, are, as a percentage, look small. If I were to show this data for maybe just, video calls, etc., you will see this number as being double-digit percentages. Other thing to be wary of is that deals are going to get stretched, right? Even if budget is available. And therefore, it's important to make sure that people are not forgetting deals and leaving them on the sidelines with poor follow-up. Yeah, I mean, I think on a lighter note, of course, everybody's been struggling with work from home and internet challenges, right? So we did some quick analysis on, are people talking increasingly more about, sorry, can you hear me? I can't see you. Can you see me? All those very nuanced things, right? So what we see here is actually that number hasn't changed as much, right? I would have at the outset expected that maybe that number has become twice or thrice, 2 or 3x of what it was, when people were working from the office. All right. So it's surprising. Looks like everybody is well set up to work from home. Of course, it does look like reps are talking a little bit more about it than they were in the past. But maybe part of it is just the nervous tick, right? As you open the conversation and maybe you're a little more distracted in a home environment, you start out by, mindlessly saying, "Can you hear me?" This is actually my co-founder's child taking over his laptop. And what we saw was that, the other favorite topic of people today, right, is to talk about kids and parenting and schools being shut and all of that. Right. So whether or not you're selling to an education space, those words are going to come up more often. So, the interesting thing here is that while customers have started talking much more about kids, right, reps haven't really caught on. Right. And maybe that's something to take away, because often people struggle with building rapport. And this could be a good point to build rapport on, because, what people care about the most and what is much more in their face literally during the work from home is their family and kids. Right. So just maybe pausing to, give them space for it, or just, inquiring about it is probably good. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to cover. This is a quick summary. Right. Change is here to stay. We all have to deal with it. And while people are talking about budgets, it's not as much as we would have expected. Right. People are talking much more about ROI and discounts. Right. So maybe a takeaway there is that people are also in some sense using this situation to drive down discounts. I think one thing that this has given, and especially when we are selling from India to the US, is this has given us a shared context like never before. Right. Today you can talk with everybody about a lockdown. Actually, maybe that's the other word that I should search for. How often are people talking about lockdowns? And what was surprising was that the activity numbers, especially on the video calls, have actually increased. Right. So that's something to watch out for. Right. Make sure that your reps also have the time to rest and recuperate, and keep them motivated. Maybe revisiting goals and targets, coaching them. All of those are important. Because this crisis is not going away in a couple of months.
This is terrific, Shruti. I think great insights. A lot of us, while we talk to startups and also help them reach out to US customers, a lot of these insights are very hard to find by. And I'm very glad you shared this, because I was talking to another founder with whom I was helping out for the last 2 months. And we are exactly going through these challenges. So great to see some of those insights validate those hypotheses on customer interactions and some of the challenges that the industry is facing.
I'm curious to hear, Bimlesh, when, like in your own experience with hearing and working with founders and, also helping them pitch to investors, what has been the, that dynamic, the founder-investor dynamic in the last few months?
Couple of things have changed. At an early stage, founder investor conversations, except for a few segments like health tech and edutech, most of them else, in what I've seen, conversations have been really low. And the uptick has just started in June, July right now. With respect to customer conversations, all of them are struggling to find access to customers over the phone. Because not many websites are able to give mobile numbers of the customers out in the US. Many companies in the US have not geared up transferring calls from the board line to their personal numbers. That's again based on hierarchy, right? So senior you are in the hierarchy, you're likely to get a call transfer. So reaching out to people over phone is the number one biggest challenge in an outreach. So now the pattern, what I'm seeing over the last 6 months, is to go very hard on social selling, right? And to have multiple touch points, is to reach out on email, reach out on LinkedIn, have a fantastic, a digital strategy to convert your inbounds, and you make your website much more stronger than what it was before. Right, so you integrate tools like Clearbit to really understand people who interacted or engaged with your content, are they landing on your website? And if you're landing on your website, do you have sales reps that are ready to engage with with these prospects? So this has fundamentally changed in the way good companies are able to make some progress in their sales cycles, even in impacted industries, right?
Actually, to that point of, of course, valuing inbound much more, right? We've seen both trends. We've seen trends of companies that were heavily reliant only on inbound, right? Who have started to see success during the pandemic with their outbound efforts. And part of it could just be that, people have more patience and lesser budgets today. Right. So even from a prospect's point of view, they are open to conversations as long as you're not forcing them into a decision. The second thing that we've seen is with work from home, people are seeing leads throughout the week. Right. There used to be a very clear Monday to Friday. People will not even run digital ads on weekends. But even for ourselves, we consistently see leads coming in from the US on Saturdays and Sundays.
Yes. Now the workday concept has shifted, right?
Yeah.
And I've also heard this from a few customers, that I have been talking to, that their work day times have also changed, right? So they no longer work 9 to 6 or 8 to 5, as in the US. They work a couple of hours in the morning. The rest of the day goes in, with the kids and family, and they again catch up a lot of work in the night, across engineering and non-engineering roles as well. And in sales, people try to figure out different times to get in touch with people. Have you also been able to look at this data between the calls being made from India to US versus calls being made from US to US? Is there any difference there?
I haven't done that split.
But in your customer base, you have that type of a split, where you have customers who have sales teams in India and customers who have sales team in the US.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and we have customers who have sales teams in both places, right? So, for example, we work with ChargeBee, right? So they of course have a sales team in India. They also sell to Europe. They also now have a sales team in Europe and in Australia. And of course, they have a pretty large one in the US, right? So they kind of cover that. And of course, there are other customers that are purely selling from India to the US. But honestly, I think when we've looked at, at a customer level also, we shared COVID-related analysis with our customers. We didn't see a significant difference from the combined data that we saw today.
Got a first question come in. This is from Charit Kashyap from Celvitate. What kind of digital assets are to be created before we go all out to overseas market?
Good question. I think in some sense we learned it the hard way as well, right? So we did a few different iterations of go to market in the US, right? So the first version of it was just to actually physically go there and meet people from the perspective of understanding their needs without a selling agenda at all, right? And then when we did, so last year we were part of the Y Combinator program and we spent a few months in the US, and that part of that we did a much more focused sales-based outreach, and we were also there in person, and we had a lot of meetings. And what we realized through that process was that the biggest question mark that everybody has, right? And that's just if I'm working with a startup, right? So if a startup reaches out to me, my first question would be, okay, should I even spend time engaging with them because I don't know whether they'll be around, right, a few months later or a year later. And the second, so basically it's a trust question and a longevity question. And the trust question becomes much more severe when you're doing this cross-border, right? Because I don't have a shared context from you, right? You don't look like me, you don't talk like me, you don't have any people in common with me. And so I think when it comes to digital assets, the things to be created most urgently are things that help build trust, right? So whether that is, specific case studies or getting your existing customers to go and talk about you on forums like G2 Crowd, Capterra, Quora. But I would say that even more important than a good pitch deck or a good, like product feature sheet or whatever else is building those trust building collaterals.
Do you also recommend building, assets based on the stage of the funnels of engagement that you can use to engage with your prospects?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the stage at which you are. Right, like if you're literally thinking that there's only like 3 or 4 things that I have bandwidth to create, right, then you would probably think of it more in terms of what are the 3 or 4 checkboxes somebody is trying to check, right? And then the digital asset is not just limited to what you might use in the selling process, but when you purely think about trust, right, it will also be around having a good privacy policy in place. So yes, I mean, and some of those are relevant to different stages of the funnel, like you said, right? So trust at an early stage might be about a case study or a testimonial. Trust at a later stage might be about a privacy policy and security documentation. I would like to think I answered all of the questions before people could ask them.
So talk to us a little bit about how does coaching help? Why is coaching important to sales reps? And do you see the need of coaching increase during these times when 2 things have happened? When now the sales rep are on their own in their zone, and they're also remote, and and the pressures of meeting their quota with a tough outcome situations like this is also on their heads. The fear of losing jobs if the company does not grow well also kind of exists. And in India, there's a strong saying, right? Quarter se quarter tak. A sales guy lives by every quarter. So talk to us a little bit while we wait for more questions. Talk to us a little bit of how coaching has changed and has it become really important now?
Yeah. So, pre-COVID or today, right? I can't call this post-COVID yet, unfortunately. But in both situations, I think people have thought of coaching as a tool to be used to improve performance, right? And therefore, a lot of focus has been on coaching your reps who are not doing as well, right? And I think that's looking at the problem entirely the wrong way, right? If you look at sports, right, it's not that Sachin Tendulkar will no longer have a coach, right? I mean, of course, today he won't, but like even the best of athletes will have a coach because everybody has blind spots, right? And when it comes to sales, and there's actually data around this, if you don't coach your people, right, the biggest impact it has is not just on performance, especially for your top performers, but the biggest impact it has is on retention. Losing and replacing a sales rep in the US, right, if you put in all the cost of, the lost quota and everything else, is $114,000. And I don't think anybody wants to willingly incur that cost, especially if you're losing a top performer. So I think the coaching paradigm needs to shift from saying, can I make somebody who's not doing so well to do a little bit better? And the reason why coaching is important for retention is that if you think of sales, it's a very repetitive job, right? You're closing deals, you're doing calls, close one deal, but you still have to go back and then, start from scratch with another one. Maybe as you progress in your career, the size of deals gets bigger, right? But everything else kind of is stuck, right? And therefore, coaching is important to make people feel that they are growing and improving. So I think that importance has increased. And of course, with COVID, that has become even more significant because, like I said, quotas haven't decreased while the expectation that quotas will be met has decreased. And so people's morale has, of course, suffered a big hit. Imagine, you're cold calling and earlier you would expect 3 people out of 100 to, respond to you. Today that number might be 1 out of 100. And, you're probably not feeling very happy about that.
We got one question coming in from Pallavi from Sara Inc. What should be the strategies for sales managers in an early stage startup to ensure high amount of lead generation and deal closure?
2 different things there, right? Lead generation and deal closures, and of course, a lot of other things that sit in between, Pallavi. So I think people need to think about lead generation, and especially early stage, right, as something that you experiment with, right? you have to keep feeding the funnel. But part of the struggle in the early stage is to figure out what is going to feed the funnel, right? There is no right or wrong answer. Whether that is to say that, should it be inbound versus outbound? If it is inbound, then should I be doing paid versus SEO? Should I be doing within paid? Should I be doing, Google versus LinkedIn? All of those are questions. And all of those can only be answered for your specific industry, for your specific price point, for your specific product with experimentation. Right? And so the important thing is the strategy should be to come up with, almost like a decision tree to say, okay, you know what? I am not trying to come up with my perfect recipe today. I'm trying to ask a question that's going to get me one step closer to the recipe. Right? And to constantly be in that mindset so that you also accept the failures and move on. Because otherwise what becomes, and it's kind of also, I think, a little bit more about us as Indians is because we are so resistant to failures, we try to justify whatever we are seeing in the data as something that, I think this could have been better, or I could have used a different copy or a different image and this ad would have performed better, rather than to take it and say, maybe this channel doesn't work for me, right? And therefore, to have those open conversations to say, failure is helping me learn to get to my best recipe, right? Or a better recipe. And that recipe might change 6 months later, and that's fine, right? Now, when it comes to deal closures, I think the answer is completely different, which is to say that how do I get to a process, right? Because what I learned, for example, is, at different stages, we had different drop-offs in different parts of the funnel. And what we realized was, at one point we realized, okay, we have this drop-off because people are not trusting us, because, they don't understand that, there are other customers or people have been using the product and they've been liking it, right? And maybe that's what we need to solve for. When we went down that process, the second thing we realized was, okay, people still have hesitation in maybe bringing their entire team on board. And so maybe we need to solve for it using, by lowering the bar in some sense, and maybe allowing people a free trial, right? Then the next thing we realized was, we need to do a better job of onboarding, because even once people have the trial of the product, they are not able to leverage it because they don't fully understand it. All right. So as you go down that, you'll need to tweak, and it's a little bit like laying bricks, right? You can't make one pillar, right? You have to lay it brick by brick so that everything is growing. So everything in your funnel needs to keep improving in conversion rates. And that's why it's kind of a lot more of a process-driven thinking that needs to come in there.
The next question is from Krishnan. Wingwin is an entity that is successful in attracting the best investor minds. When is the ideal time for a startup to go in for funding, from your experience?
We've had a variety of experiences on that front, and I can probably have a whole session on that. But I think, I think that this answer we've heard from many different people, including investors, right? If you're trying to raise a seed fund, don't tie yourself to a milestone to say that, if I hit this milestone, that is when I will go and raise funds. Because the thing is that while you think that you've made a lot of progress, right? From an investor standpoint, it's still going to be a decision that is going to be weighed largely by what they think about the space and what they think about the team, and what they call like the product founder or the market founder match. Right. So if you're looking at seed funding, then I would suggest that start talking early to people and start talking to people through a curated network. Right. Because it's a lot more about the person and the trust with the person than about an exact milestone. Right. And you have to think of it this way, that even if, like, I can go in and say, okay, I have 5 customers today, right? But having 5 customers versus having 500 customers or 50 customers or 0 customers, while going from 0 to 5 is incredibly hard, right? It doesn't prove as much, right? I could have gotten those 5 customers by just through my inner circle, or I might have done a lot of hard work and gotten them through cold calling. right? And therefore, the question that needs to get answered is, what is your ability to execute to get to the 500, right? And showing me 5 customers is useful for that, but not as useful as me understanding you as a founder, me understanding the founder market fit and those types of things.
All right, so let's wrap this up, Shruti. Thank you so much, Shruti. Thanks for your time. Amazing insights. I definitely gathered a lot of information, useful. This definitely helps us to course correct all our conversations and also our mindset on how we approach prospecting now. So thank you so much. Thanks for your time, and thank you everyone for joining in today. Loved your engagement with the poll, and also we had a few questions coming in. So thank you so much once again for coming on to PitchCamp, and joining our knowledge series session.
Thanks for having me, Bimlesh.